What's up? Welcome in to the latest Irish Huddle podcast. It's Thursday, October 29th, 2020. I'm Patrick Engel, joined as always by Lou Somogyi. Lou, I'm going to start you off with this weekly trivia here. Georgia Tech, Notre Dame's opponent this week. The longest tenured, I don't know what the word would be, but it has been the longest amount of time between meetings from Georgia Tech and Notre Dame among any of the ACC teams since Notre Dame went into the conference. 2015 has played every other ACC team since then. Notre Dame last won, of course, 30-22 in 2015. And from what you had just mentioned to me, that game had a very bizarre lead-in that I don't think we're going to see anything like this week. I mean, just looking at the line. Take us back to that for a minute and just how strange the lead-in to that game was.
Well, Georgia Tech had just won its first two games against significantly inferior opposition and averaged about 60 points a game, whereas Notre Dame came off a very, very difficult outing at Virginia, which wasn't that good that season. And not only that, but the starting quarterback, Malik Zaire, was lost for the year. And Deshaun Kaiser came in through a 11th hour touchdown pass to Will Fuller to win that game. So Georgia Tech coming into Notre Dame Stadium was actually favored in that game. And that was a Georgia Tech team that eventually finished 3-9. But this goes back again to kind of a theme we had last week about everyone being uptight about, gosh, they only beat Louisville 12-7. I love it sometimes like that because now I know they're going to play well against Pittsburgh because that's in their mind. And for whatever reason, they have rabbit ears there at Notre Dame too. They see that, they hear that, and it's like, are you freaking kidding me? Georgia Tech is favored in our stadium. Notre Dame, the final score was close, 30-22, but it was 30-7 with about 5 minutes left. And Georgia Tech scored a couple of touchdowns. And, yeah, if they had recovered the onside kick, they would have had a chance to tie it. But it was mind-boggling to everybody. And I know the team was aware of it, too. It's like, how the hell are they favored in our stadium? So, yeah, I think it'll be a while before we see something like that.
Yeah, I know they went to the Orange Bowl that previous year, but wow. I mean, a lot of sports bettors, I think, ate pretty well and dined pretty well that weekend, taking Notre Dame to cover that line. A lot of things have been different since then. Of course, Georgia Tech, no longer a triple option team that it was under Paul Johnson, now a more traditional pro-style spread, whatever it is, into year two of its move away from the triple option, or as I would call it, PTO, year two post triple option. 3:30 Eastern, ABC, same time as last week at Atlanta's Bobby Dodd Stadium. Before we dive into the game a little bit more, I want to make sure you are subscribed to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button and like this video, and hit subscribe to our YouTube channel to get more content there. Follow us on Twitter at Patrick Engel _ENGEL. That's me. And you can follow Lou at BGI _Lou Somogyi, SOMOGYI. If you'd be so kind, please leave us a rating, leave us a review. If you like what you hear, leave us 5 stars, nice comments, and tell your friends about us. So, Lou, Notre Dame heading into this one as what I think it opened at 19.5. I don't remember off the top of my head if it has changed or anything like that since then. Right now, my immediate reaction to that was Notre Dame will win by 3 touchdowns and cover that one. But a lot of different things at play here. Georgia Tech's one of those, I guess what you'd call them a fun bad team. Like, they're not very good, but they'll make it interesting. They have some exciting players, guys who belong on the field with good teams, and at least aren't out there getting just run off the field for 60 minutes entirely by these teams. I know the Clemson score was 66 points. It was at least competitive for a quarter, and hey, they picked off Trevor Lawrence, so that was interesting. But I don't know. What are you watching for and looking at coming into this one?
I don't think, I think a popular theme is going to be that, okay, Notre Dame's looking ahead to Clemson. You know what? They already know they're looking ahead to Clemson, but that's an asset right now, not a negative, because it's like if we're going to compete against Clemson, just like last week against Pitt, we have to really demonstrate how good and confident we can be going into the game. So I don't see that as a negative for this game, just like it wasn't against Pitt, because they've acknowledged they are looking ahead, but it's in a positive vein. Another thing that comes to mind is, so many times people like to use the transitive property of mathematics in picking
Oh,
college
the
football
internet's
scores.
favorite.
And look, Louisville lost to Georgia Tech the week before playing Notre Dame by 19 points and lost only by 5 at Notre Dame. So I don't think that makes Georgia Tech necessarily a 14-point favorite based off of that, but it does go to show how, every week, as we emphasized last week, is its own compartment. It's its own entity. And what I am expecting, though, is to Notre Dame to continue to build on that confidence and momentum that they built last week at Pitt, going right back on the road and saying, okay, let's do it again, so that we don't go into, Clemson with this feeling of impending doom or anything like that. Not that they would. You can't afford to, because then you're beat before you even take the field. But I think it's just a feeling not of overconfidence, but just that genuine acknowledgement that, hey, we're pretty good and we can hold our own, if not more, against Clemson.
Yeah, you can't be caught looking ahead accidentally. If you know you're looking ahead, right? Insert that gif of the guy, tapping his brain, the more you know, right? And I don't think Notre Dame's going to be caught in that spot either. I mean, I think we heard from, at least when we got a chance to talk to a few of the players on Tuesday, that what's important next and what you do in these games has bearing later on in the season and really can give you a boost heading into that season. So yeah, I mean, it just, I mean, I know we talked about it before, but I think it's just still such an interesting message and neat motivation tool or whatever going into that Clemson game of, yeah, you're looking ahead to it. I mean, what, there's a schedule in their team meeting room that they see every single day. I mean, Ian Book, just like Brian Kelly was. I mean, it's pretty crazy how those two have kind of mirrored each other at this point. But anyway, just like Kelly said, like, yeah, it's hard not to look ahead. You know the magnitude of this game. And to lean right into that, you go, all right, I mean, you have these two games that you can really prove to yourselves that you belong out there if you take care of business. And, we want to dominate everybody we play. That's their kind of thing. And their mindset, I guess, that Kelly has tried to hammer into them. I mean, that's really kind of the same thing that we heard him say in that halftime speech against South Florida that got some folks up in arms about disrespect or whatever. No, it's, we want to play these types of games in that kind of manner. So I don't think it's any situation where it's a trap game. I think that it really can only be a trap game if you don't see the trap. I don't think that's the case here at all.
I don't anticipate anything like that happening. Now, Georgia Tech, after some really bad performances, especially on defense with the 73-7 loss to Clemson, and then followed that with the 48-27 defeat to Boston College, they're reeling a little bit. But being at home, being on that black watch, with the uniforms and jerseys,
Yes, looking uniforms.
which didn't help Pittsburgh much, and the green jerseys haven't always helped Notre Dame much for the motivation play or anything like that. But I think they want to prove themselves in the sense that we're better than this, and maybe they might play their best game. And the one thing I am anticipating is, even if Notre Dame scores, 45 points against, let's say it's like, gee, well, Clemson scored 73. That's 28 less, and therefore, Clemson is going to do this or that. Why couldn't we score like that many? Those are always inevitable aspects for message board fodder and all. But I'm expecting Georgia Tech to want to prove that it's better than it has shown the past 2 weeks, and the fact that it did win at Florida State to open the season and did have an impressive performance against Louisville. They want to kind of get back to that, but this is a program in some dramatic flux right now, and I just don't know. I can see where they would be competitive for maybe a half or so before Notre Dame eventually starts pulling away.
Yeah, let's say Notre Dame wins by, I don't know, 5 touchdowns or something. They score in the 40s and hold Georgia Tech to fewer than 2 scores. I don't think any, like you said, things of, well, why couldn't they put up 60 or whatever, would really be warranted. I mean, okay, one, if you win by 5 touchdowns, it's pretty good, right? Like, it's hard to take too much away from that unless it's just this massive, fluke thing. And I also think it's worth pointing, from what I've gathered, I think Clemson was pretty motivated to put up as many points as possible on Georgia Tech. I don't think Dabo was too thrilled with some of Jeff Collins's comments about the triple option and how that's been a setback moving away from that. Dabo and Paul Johnson, I think, are buds, and don't trash Dabo's buds or he's going to hang 70 on you and tell his guys to do that. I think there might have been something last year where they hurt the backup quarterback too. Georgia Tech did to Clemson. I don't know exactly, but from what I gathered, Dabo wanted to, not only did he not want to take his foot off the gas, he wanted to put the cinder block on the gas until the clock hit 0. So I think that's part of it too. But yeah, I mean, of course they have the guy who's going to be the number 1 pick in all likelihood. But anyway, here, you want to know a fun fact about Georgia Tech. Jeff Collins does not believe in depth charts. And that's not one of those things where it's like Jim Harbaugh, where he's like, I'm not putting one out there. We're putting like Star Wars characters' names to competitive advantage it. It's like this weird format he calls above the line. And if you're like above the line, you're good enough to play. And I guess it's kind of creative. I mean, he's a creative thinker, energetic guy, certainly has put some juice into that and their whole, turnaround from option to whatever they want it to be. But this is just kind of weird, right? I don't know. I read it. Like, if you read that depth chart and you didn't know like every starter, like who's actually played, you'd be like, all right, is the first name on there the guy who's starting? Is it just alphabetical or what? Like, I don't know. Like, what are we doing here? Like, it's not a competitive advantage thing because you're saying who's going to play in the game, and what, this is game 6. You've got film on it. Like, I don't know. I just saw that and think like, what are we doing?
My thought was, you're not good enough to do something.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you are good enough, you don't care. I always recall back in the late 80s, early 90s, when Notre Dame was just, in its halcyon years under Lou Holtz, they gave to us like the bench press numbers, the 40 times and everything of the players there. And we would print them, and we didn't print negative stats, but we were allowed to and whatever. And after a while, when Notre Dame started not being as good, it's like, no, we don't want to print these anymore. Florida State, they had a publication. They printed everything, every player, bench press, vertical jump. It was 40 times. It's sort of like, here you go. Let's try to stop us or whatever. We don't care about the information or anything. This is who we are. We're going to finish in the top 4 like we always did from 1987 through 99 in NCAA record. And it didn't matter. If you're good enough, you don't need to do that kind of stuff.
It just seems like one of those cheesy motivational things where, all right, if you're the 5th guy above the line,
yeah,
right tackle or something, like, all right, that's not meaningful. We're not getting in the game unless a bunch of guys get hurt.
Yeah, and no disrespect. They do. Everyone's got to run his program as he sees fit and what he thinks can be best served as a motivation to everyone. I just look at it from a perspective of how I remember how it was here, and that you probably really don't need to do that.
Yeah, and I like Jeff just from afar as a energetic person who's, like I said, engaging, has juice. Like he just kind of walks around like exuding that, and that's kind of cool. He's like that kind of typical, you know, excitable football coach. But yeah, I don't really get this one. But his current team, whatever group of guys above the line has been running out there as his starters. Like I said, they're probably going to go about 4-8 or whatever the equivalent of 4-8 is in this shortened season. I don't think they're going to finish in last place like they were projected to. I mean, they were not happy about that. And here's what Collins actually said about that a few weeks ago. We were picked to finish 15th in a 14-team league. I don't know if that ever made it over to Notre Dame interwebs yet, but okay, there you go. Do with it what you will. I get what he's trying to say though. Yeah, I don't think that's the case. One of those teams, it's exciting. They can hit you with some explosive plays. I mean, I think they have 30 plays of at least 20 yards. I believe that is top 20 nationally. Of course, if you take out any teams that have played one game or whatever, although if you played one game and got 30 plays of 20 plus, you're winning by 100 points. And that right there is kind of how they've been more explosive, more efficient, despite a true freshman quarterback who's been good, but still is completing only about 55% of his throws. Not particularly great, but they can hit you downfield. They've got two good running backs now that Jordan Mason is back healthy. So I think there are some weapons here that have allowed them to hang in there with most of these teams they've played. I mean, obviously Clemson was the mess that it was, but against everybody else, they've been able to move the ball with some consistency.
Their problem has been self-inflicted mainly because they have 18 turnovers this year, and 10 of the 150 passes that freshman quarterback Sims has thrown have been intercepted. That's an inordinately high amount. But the 18 turnovers out of 100 out of 101 teams that have, that's ranked 100th. So only one team has had more that have played college football so far this year. That's been their albatross this season. Is they've been able to move the ball relatively well. They're averaging about 180 yards rushing, which is pretty good, especially with the main cog being another true freshman, Jameer Gibbs. They have three true freshmen starting on that offense, along with Sims and Gibbs. They have a right tackle Williams as well. But when you have 18 turnovers, and in the last two games, Notre Dame hasn't had any. And I believe it's only 3 for the year, something along that, 3 or 4. So they rank among the tops in the country with that, which they've been pretty much doing annually. So that's been, if you can limit the turnovers, then they can be competitive in the game. But just like Pitt last week, you lose 3 interceptions like that set up 21 points for Notre Dame in their own territory. That's a tough way to make a living.
Yeah, it doesn't do you any good to set up a team that's already heavily favored against you, that you're going to be hard pressed to move the ball on with easy fields and all that kind of stuff that self-inflicted, like you said. I mean, it's just kind of the bumps you ride with a freshman quarterback, freshman playmakers. I think that's absolutely the best thing for them to have those guys out there, just based on what we've seen. And Gibbs was one of their biggest recruits in recent memory, a top 70 kid who I think has a little bit of, I don't mean not a clone of Kyron, Williams. I don't want to make this comparison or anything. I don't think the leg strength or whatever is there, but the multi dimensional usage of catch a lot of passes, uh, good skilled runner who can make you miss, has some speed. In the sense that they're both used in similar ways of involvement in the running game and in the passing game.
Gibbs very effective as a pass receiver. Usually, when you think of running backs, it's like, okay, just a quick dump off or check off for maybe 3-4 yards just to get something. But his 15 catches, he's over 200 yards. He's averaging about 13, 14 yards. So he's a viable threat out of the backfield.
On the whole, their yards per completion is pretty good, and hinting at that explosiveness and kind of multi weapons that they have there. We're going to take a quick time out. We'll come back, give you our 3 burning questions, and Lou's favorite, our bold predictions. Okay, let's get to our 3 burning questions for this particular game, Notre Dame at Georgia Tech. First one, Lou. What does Notre Dame's passing offense have in store as an encore after that game that you needed to see against Pitt, where the chemistry looked better between Ian Book and his pass catchers? You had a healthy Bennett Skoranek really show what he was brought here to do. Michael Mayer's best game. What are you expecting here as the encore / tune-up to Clemson?
Possibly seeing a little bit more involvement, getting people gradually in. Those 2 touchdown catches by Ben Skoranek, those were his only 2 catches of the game, and very productive and efficient. But can he get to someplace where now he can be relied on for 4 or 5 catches a game? Michael Mayer, right now, he's the top pass catcher with 12 after 5 games. You usually don't see that at this level of football, where after 5 games, the leading receiver has only 12. Who's going to be that individual that can get that 4, 5, 6 catches for you every game you can rely on? Is it Mayer? Is it Skoranek? And to augment or complement that, can Avery Davis come into the mix? Can a Joe Wilkins maybe emerge? And I think maybe the story of the week to many on our message boards was Ian Book's comment on Tuesday about Jordan Johnson had a fantastic practice on Tuesday, making some unbelievable catches. Does he somehow get assimilated or integrated into the offense? Does he even make an appearance? Does he even make the trip? Which he did not against Pitt last week. So it's finding some complementary figures in addition to, okay, who are the mainstays that we can rely on week to week?
I think you want to see more production, I would guess I would put it, between Book and the wide receivers in particular. Another good game out of Skoranek. Even that you don't have to catch 2 touchdowns and average 50 yards a catch, but just another productive game where he catches a lot of his targets, converts on 3rd down, just some kind of furthering chemistry that makes you think, all right, there's some kind of thing here between Book and his receivers that you can go into this Clemson game thinking that you can at least use. I mean, we'll see if it gets shut down or anything, but at least something that like you can be pretty confident in that it exists. It's here. It's just a matter of, can you do it against, what Dabo Swinney has called his one of his better secondaries and cornerback units. So I think you want to see this game in particular be one where you still look to further that. I would imagine what we saw from Michael Mayer this past week with the target load and catch load, you want to see that again. I mean, I've said it before, but it's just going to remain true. The highest ceiling for Notre Dame's passing offense this year is when Michael Mayer gets as many targets as possible. And I guess within that, Tommy Tremble, 3 straight games of 1 catch. I think you want to see a little more of trying to get him the ball. I know we think about the blocking all the time, but the receiving skill hasn't really gone away. I mean, you still have the speed and the deep threat. I know they tried on that shot play or that trick play with Kyron Williams throwing the ball, but I still think that at least right now, if you just took and picked out Notre Dame's 4 best pass catchers, regardless of position, that he's in there. So we'll see if they try to get him in there a little bit, especially with just still how often they're using 12 personnel. The opportunity and the snap count is still there.
Yeah, first play against Pitt, they targeted him, and I imagine they may try something early on with him too, just to perhaps get him into a rhythm as a pass catcher, not just as a blocker.
And especially further down the field, we've seen a lot of these targets be on short throws. I mean, his one throw or catch against Pitt was a 1 yard gain. So I imagine you try to stretch things a little bit more vertically there. All right, question number 2. Is there anything that Notre Dame can do in this game to substantially move or move at all the confidence meter of they can hang with Clemson, they can beat Clemson, whatever? What does that look like? Or is it even possible, however fair or unfair just saying that might be?
Oh, that's a tough one, just because you know for so many years now, that's been the one aspect of Notre Dame that's been knocked, is that, you know what? It has become a good top 10 program. It defeats everyone it is supposed to defeat. But until you get that scalp on the wall against one of the top teams in the country, and really right now, there's the big three. There's Alabama, there's Clemson, there's Ohio State, and really there's everyone else. Maybe the second level might consist of Oklahoma, because they've been consistently in the college football playoff, and Georgia, which, if they weren't in the SEC and having to face Alabama every year in the SEC championship game, they'd be a regular contender for the playoff as well. And Notre Dame's kind of right in that loop as well. LSU had that big outlier season last year where one of the most prolific teams ever, if not ever, in college football. But it's not a confidence thing right now. I think Notre Dame recognizes that it's very good. It's on a strong foundation. But the reality also is that the 5 teams that it defeated are a combined 9-22. Number of those wins, like Florida State over Jacksonville State, have come against much lesser opposition. So it's just a matter, when all is said and done, sometimes more gets said than done, and you got to do it eventually on the field. You can't be thinking about, can we come close like at Georgia last year, or at Georgia, or versus Georgia in 2017, or being competitive. At some point, you got to slay the dragon.
Just like you said, and going off that, I'm not really sure there is much this can do for like, oh yeah, we beat Georgia Tech by 60. I'm now this much more confident. Or, oh no, we only beat them by 10. I'm this much less confident, whatever. And in a way, that's kind of unfair, I guess, is the closest word you can put to it. Because, I mean, Lou, I don't know if you know this at all, this shocking news. You can only play the team that you're scheduled to play this week.
Right.
The more you know. But, yeah, you can only do what you're supposed to do or expected to do there. In this case, it's win handily. So even though, yes, a win that's okay, again, let's say they cover the spread, no stress, whatever. I don't think that's gonna make a ton of people feel, oh yeah, I'm that much more confident. But I think it will also get lumped into that, oh, these pre Clemson games against teams that aren't that good. And no one's really going to remember, this game, this score, this particulars a year from now, or even if Notre Dame wins the ACC or goes to the playoff or goes to the Orange Bowl or whatever happens. And it won't be a particularly game that stands out as some turning point in all likelihood. But yeah, it's just one of those where, yeah, like you mentioned, you won't take anything away from them for a game that they win handily, if indeed that is the case. But no, I don't think that it's a thing where, even if that's what you want to see, you've come to expect to see, and will be worthy of praise just for, again, winning a game by a large margin is impressive no matter what. But yeah, I don't know that it will be like your fans will be thinking here and saying, oh yeah, Notre Dame held them to 5, I don't know, a touchdown, or 3 yards of play or whatever, and
It,
be
it will,
jazzed
it,
up and be like, yeah, let's go. Even though it'd be that would be, I should say, like exactly the trajectory that and what we've heard, the players and coaches talk about, that that's the trajectory and the type of wins you want to see going in. But from the fan perspective, no, I doubt that will move things too much, as impressive as it would be just in a vacuum.
it will be a positive for Notre Dame when a storyline the week before the Clemson game is going to be, gosh, Notre Dame's 6 opponents are combined 11 and 27.
All right.
They'll be hearing that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
just like after the Louisville game, they're hearing, oh, they're not that good, they're overrated. And this, it will serve as an impetus, as a positive force for them. I'm not saying that means they'll win or anything like that, but it will generate, I think a good practice week at Notre Dame, and a very focused and concentrated one.
And especially if it's 2 straight games against those teams that are lumped into that overall record of doing what you're supposed to do against those kinds of teams, if you are indeed good enough to beat Clemson, make the playoff, whatever. Okay, enough of the what does it mean for Clemson talk, even though it's hard to avoid right now as it gets so close. Let's just dive right into this game. Question number 3. Will there be more sack chances for Notre Dame's defense? I think that's still kind of the one thing that you really want to see. And maybe that is one thing, actually, that could make you feel a little bit better if you get to the quarterback 4 times or something, or 5 times, and you have 5 or 6 more quarterback hurries or something like that. Do you I don't know. Do you think there will be sack chances, or just even this is just a game where something comes together, whether that be rotation or just an urgency, whatever it is, and they get Jeff Sims on the ground quite a bit?
I always hate saying this. I just think sacks sometimes get so overglorified. Uh, Notre Dame had 3 sacks last week against Pittsburgh, and part of it is that Pittsburgh pretty much gave up on the run and just said, we can't run, we're just going to go back. And so Notre Dame knew what was coming there, and maybe that facilitated it. But it's like, doggone it, only 3 sacks? Well, it's not really about sacks for me. It's affecting the quarterback. How many of those 3 interceptions were by the quarterback being affected by certain things? That created turnovers. It created 3 touchdown drives. And I know sacks are sexy. They're sexy as hell, and everyone loves to see them. And I'd love to see if they can put up 5 or 6. But it's not a end-all, be-all from my perspective as far as how effective you are on defense. You gave up as many points last week as you had sacks, 3. If you have 3 points given up, Notre Dame and Northwestern were the only 2 teams last week in college football who didn't give up a touchdown. And it's not because they had all these sacks, but they consistently affected the quarterback, either rushing him, either forcing him into turnovers and all. I mean, if I have a choice between somebody, a quarterback scrambling, losing 5 yards, or a quarterback throwing quickly and hurriedly into coverage that Notre Dame intercepts and brings back into pit territory, I'll take the latter.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I also think you mentioned both of those games. It helps that they played 2 just putrid offenses. But yeah, and I know we talked about this last week because the question was a similar one, and I think it's fair to at least ask again, because I think this is the one area you look at on the defense and say, yeah, it's above average. But it's not like great, or this thing of, oh yeah, I'm very confident right now that it can go up against whatever good offensive line and affect the quarterback, to use your term. So, and just on the whole, I think we've looked at this pass rush unit and said it has been solid, above average. But yeah, I mean, maybe this is just one game where you want to see more, because you still want to get them on the ground if you can. And I know it's hard, and when Pitt's completing 40% of its passes because you're just throwing it away all the time, and non-competitive throws, you can't get a sack on an incomplete pass. Again, don't know if you know that piece of very intricate football trivia, but yeah, I just think at some point you'd still like to see just some type of more production from the pass rush in whatever form that comes in. If you get a thing where it's 15 quarterback hurries on the stat sheet, but 2 sacks, yeah, I think you'll take that and be pretty happy with it.
I did think there was pretty good penetration a few times, both by Myron Tagovailoa
He's had a
last
great
week,
year.
including that one sack where he handled a couple of guys.
That was some Khalil
And,
Mack
yeah,
back sack through a lineman kind of stuff. Yeah, that was impressive.
that was almost like the old Bubba Smith commercial for light beer, where it's like you pick up the entire backfield and then throw out guys until you find the one with the ball, and then record it, record the tackle or so. But you know, again, I'd love to see him and all, but for me, it's not necessarily a reflection of just how well the defense is playing.
All right, Lou, time for your favorite. Let's do our bold predictions. Once again, I will kick this off here. Notre Dame will have 2 100-yard rushers against Georgia Tech. One of them will be Kyron Williams. I'll just leave it at that. But I think this is a game where, obviously, like it has every game this year, Notre Dame's going to come out and want to run the ball. I think they'll be very successful in it against a Georgia Tech defense that's given up chunk runs, had a lot of injuries, rotation, inconsistency, all the kinds of things you don't want to see on its defensive line. So I think it just sets up for a feel-good rushing day heading into a game where they're going to want to have just experienced that.
That's an interesting one because they actually did a good job on Travis Etienne. He had 11 carries for 44 yards. The bad news is Trevor Lawrence threw for about 400 yards in one half and 5 touchdowns. So sometimes you can overcommit. What was surprising, though, and then last week maybe they overcompensated the other way because BC, which has been a horrid running team most of this season. They're pretty much putting it all on their quarterback, Phil Jakovic. A few people might have heard of him, but he ran for 94 yards on 7 carries. But I think Boston College had like 260 plus yards rushing against
that's about right.
Georgia Tech last week, and that's kind of unusual. Now BC's identity, certainly under Steve Addazio, and even before that, was a power running game. And so that's an interesting take on it because when you give up that many yards rushing to Boston College, you think, okay, Notre Dame might have a field day as well. I'll go to the defensive side of the ball, and you didn't have your annual pick of Kyle Hamilton returning a pick 6 or so, but what I'll go with is for the first time since 2012, the Notre Dame defense will record 3 straight games of single digits for the opposition. It beat Louisville 12-7, beat Pitt 45-3. And I think with, when you're looking at a true freshman quarterback and true freshman running back as your lead guys, that's, I think, tailor-made for this defense to continue to excel. And that would be the first time since 2012 when Notre Dame finished 12-0 during the regular season, made it to the BCS championship game. They beat Michigan State 20-3. The next week, with Bernard Robinson at quarterback, they defeated Michigan 13-6. And then the next game, they defeated Miami 41-3. So, and even after that, Stanford, it was 20-13. And the only score by Stanford was on defense of a fumble recovery in the end zone. So that was a really, really salty defense. And I think this one is falling into that category as well.
I have a hard time seeing Georgia Tech score more than twice for a lot of the reasons you just outlined. I think they'll hit a few chunks, but it won't be enough to keep pace with what we expect from Notre Dame, especially if my prediction comes true that they run for a bunch of yards. All right, Lou, final score. What do you got?
Originally I had it in the edition at 35-13, but because I just made this bold prediction, how about if I reduce it something to like 35-9 or 34-9, right around there?
Is that 9 points? No touch, like
3
no
field goals.
Okay.
3 field
All right.
goals. They'll penetrate. They'll get inside there, but they'll be forced into field goals.
Notre Dame red zone defense has been very good with allowing keeping teams out of the end zone once they get down there.
Well, although I will say maybe I should make it a touchdown, a missed extra point, and a field goal because Georgia Tech has had 6 kicks blocked this year,
Ooh.
which is easily the most, I think, in college football. And I think 4 of them have come on like extra points or field goal attempts. So maybe I should make it 8 points, a touchdown and a 2-point conversion.
There you go. Yeah, just start going for 2 every time. Why not? You got to do something crazy to win one of these games. I'm going to go 42-14. Like I said, I think they'll have a couple of drives where there's just this big play that gets loose because they have a few skill players that belong out there and can hold their own against most of these ACC defenses or good defenses. Notre Dame's certainly among the best they've faced. But, yeah, I just think they'll run into turnover problems, freshman mistakes, whatever, and just Notre Dame's defense has been good enough against even these types of teams. And I don't see them scoring more than twice, so going 42-14. And that, we both have them covering. Do you know what the over-under is, Lou? I don't remember off the top of my head.
I thought I saw it at 19.5. I haven't
the over-under.
We'll have it up on
that's
Friday's
correct.
predictions that we do.
Right. Do you know what the over-under was, though?
That I didn't look at.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure either, but I'll look real quick here. It is 57. So you've got them under. I've got them over. We'll see what happens. We will talk to you again after the game, probably late Sunday or early Monday. Notre Dame and Georgia Tech, 3:30, ABC. Till then, take care.